Moving on to Arlington Heights, we'll have to ask him quite a few questions about that. Also preventing injuries throughout the National Football League, so kind of staying on that line with the help of AI. And the city's inspector general is going to stop in and talk about the new report that's out. It is full of bombshells, so there's plenty of conversation to be had. But I want to start with a story that seems to have a new twist each and every week, and that goes to Broadview, the village of Broadview. For more than a month now, it's really been the center of attention throughout the nation as this ongoing conversation happens about the ICE processing center there. Local authorities, federal authorities now having this clash outside of the processing center with protesters. The fences went up around it. They are now down, thanks to a judge's order, in part because they were blocking emergency services. So I want to bring in Michael Delgado, Broadview Village Attorney. Thank you so much for making some time for us today. Can you hear me, Attorney Delgado? Waiting to see if he can hear me. Again, the judge on Friday ruled that this, and it's a federal judge, ruled that these fences needed to come down. So we are waiting to speak with him any moment now, just as soon as we can get him in. Attorney Delgado, do we have you now?
You do.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much for your time. You have deemed this a real-life case of the cinematic version of the mouse that roared, that improbably won. Explain what you meant by that.
Well, I think it's a significant victory for Mayor Thompson and her resolve and the people of Broadview and municipal governments around the country. Broadview is a non-home rule municipality with 9,000 citizens, and the federal government had Broadview as an afterthought. Mayor Thompson said, "Not on my watch," and she authorized us to file suit, which is not usual. Local governments typically don't file lawsuits against the federal government. That's usually reserved to the Attorney General of the state. But we found a theory. And we filed suit, and a federal judge agreed with us. And it was a resounding victory for local rights, Broadview's autonomy, Broadview's ability to enforce its laws against everybody, including the federal government.
Huge moment for sure. That fence went up by ICE on September 23rd, so it's been up for a minute now. It was a major development that's just taken place. It doesn't necessarily eradicate the issue that's bringing the protesters there. So what's your response now? What happens now to keep the peace?
Well, the fence coming down was primarily for public safety. The Broadview EMS and fire department could not get through. If there was a medical incident or a fire at any of the businesses located behind the fence, which are private businesses in Broadview, or if there was a medical incident inside the detention center, we would be prevented from getting through. We'd have to let somebody would have to let them in. There'd be precious moments delayed, and it could cost somebody their life. So the fence coming down is a public safety issue. The protesters separately, I think, were supportive of it because it also allows them closer access to the ICE detention center.
Yeah, some people would ask, though, why it took so long. Again, going back to September 23rd, if there was an issue, why did it take so long for us to get to this point? Because it did seem like for a while that things were steadily getting worse out there. What's your response to that?
From the day the fence went up without Broadview's permission across a local street that Broadview not only owns but controls, we immediately contacted DHS. We contacted ICE. We asked them to remove it. We received no response. Mayor Thompson sent a strongly worded letter demanding that the fence be removed, and the response from ICE was to call Mayor Thompson part of the problem, not part of the solution. And so we had no other choices but to resort to court intervention. We tried everything short of filing a lawsuit. And ultimately, when it was filed on a Friday. We requested an emergency hearing, and we were given Tuesday for our hearing. And on Tuesday, the hearing was held, and on Thursday, the judge issued her order.
Yeah.
So in the realm of the legal community, that's a pretty quick turnaround.
Yeah, it does lead me to my next question about communication. So many local officials have talked about a lack of communication between them and the federal government. Can you tell me a little bit more about where that stands with you all in the federal government there in the Village of Broadview?
It continues. There is a unified command made up of the state police, the Cook County's emergency services, Cook County Sheriff, and the Broadview Police Department. So there's a lot of coordination, a lot of communication between state, county, and local agencies, but there continues to remain a lack of communication between those agencies, Broadview and ICE or DHS. They act in a, pardon me.
I mentioned the argument that you had regarding the fence blocking emergency services, but I would like you to maybe address whether there were some actual instances or examples that you could give of the fence maybe putting lives or businesses at risk.
Well, thankfully, there were no fires and no emergency instances that would delay EMS, but should or could it have been allowed to continue, it was only a matter of time before there was a fire or before there was an emergency call for medical services, and we would have been delayed in our response.
What is your overall take on so much focus, really nationwide, being on the Village of Broadview over the last month and a half?
Well, I think Mayor Thompson has shown her leadership. It's a community of 9,000 people, and she was vaulted into the spotlight, not at her request. And she has shown not only grace and compassion in how she has balanced the interests of her residents, public safety, the rights of protesters, the First Amendment. And I think she's done a tremendous job, and she earns all the accolades that she has gotten to date.
And what is your message to people in Broadview who have maybe been impacted by what's been going on out there at the processing center, even if they have nothing to do with it? They're not protesters, they're not federal agents, they just live in the Village of Broadview, and they've been impacted by everything that's been going on.
Sure. The protesters, by and large, are not Broadview residents. So the Broadview residents have been mostly impacted by the protest, impacted by the actions of ICE. And my message to them is their government, their local government, their mayor, it's working. The mayor's fighting for the community, and the mayor's doing everything she can to protect the best interests of the residents, their public safety, and their right to quiet enjoyment.
Do you feel like the Village of Broadview has been changed forever?
Certainly from a public standpoint, in the sense that people from around the world have contacted Broadview. People have sent messages of support. People have sent messages attacking the mayor and her position. So I think it has achieved broad recognition from around the country. And frankly, I think a lot of municipalities will look to Mayor Thompson and look to Broadview the next time they have an issue with the federal government. And hopefully we'll see this as a path that they too can stand up to the federal government and file suit or do whatever it is it takes to enforce their local rights.
You mentioned something that we're actually going to address a little bit later on in the show regarding political violence. Are you all having to increase security for the mayor given the threats that she's gotten as a result of this?
I can't comment on the mayor's security detail.
Okay. Well, in this instance, a federal judge approved the Village of Broadview's motion for a temporary restraining order requiring the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement Agency to dismantle that fence that we've been talking about on the public streets of the ICE processing center. It came one day after, and not even a full day, after another judge ruled on the blocking of the National Guard troops that were already on the property. So these are TROs. Do you think that you're in for a long fight? What happens when they expire?
So the judge's order was to enter a TRO because that was the relief we requested. In the order that was ultimately agreed to between the Village of Broadview and the United States Attorney's Office was to convert the TRO into a preliminary injunction. So what stands now is a preliminary injunction instead of a TRO And what that allows is a more permanent solution. It also allowed the federal government to seek an immediate appeal or a stay to the order, which they haven't done thus far. And given that they have taken the fence down, I'm not certain that it would be worthwhile for them to seek an appeal at this point.
Is that in each case? Does that
Yeah,
stand for each case?
that's just in the Broadview case. The judge's order on Thursday required the parties to either come up with an agreed order by Friday at 2 p.m. that addressed the remaining issues of the fence coming down, the timing, and the United States Attorney's Office and my firm agreed to Tuesday at 11:59 p.m. And we also agreed to convert the TRO into a preliminary injunction.
Okay, and what if the fences go back up?
They would be in violation of the federal court order.
Is there a set time, though, that the fences could go back up?
No.
Okay. All right. What else would you like to say about this case? And did you see it ending the way it has from the beginning?
No. As a lawyer, you never know. You put your best foot forward. You make the best arguments. Certainly, it's unprecedented. A local government would file suit against the federal government. And we had to come up with unique legal theories on which to do it. And you're always a little skeptical when it comes to actions like this, especially when you know ICE and DHS are going to assert that they have broad rights to effectuate national security and a variety of other arguments. So we thought we had a good argument. We thought the hearing went really well, and the judge's order was certainly supportive of that.
Yeah. And how long has that processing center been there? Because it's the center of attention right now, of course, but it's been there for quite a while.
It has been there the building has been there for 40 years and owned by the government for 40 years. And that was part of our argument, that the government has owned this building for 40 years and they had no plan. They just put a fence up in the middle of the night without a building permit, without contacting the village, blocking a local road, and they had no contingency plan. So the building itself has been under federal control for 40 plus years. It's been an ICE detention center for the last few months, but it really only started getting activity when the president announced the Operation Midway Blitz, which is the last few weeks.
Yeah. And do you have any inclination, or are you already working on any other type of suit that may need to go before a judge regarding the ICE processing center and things that have been going on there in the village of Broadview over the last month?
Currently, no. The Broadview's municipal interest was limited to the fence blocking a local right-of-way and preventing our emergency response if required. So currently, there's no other legal action that we're contemplating.
Okay. Attorney Delgado, I certainly appreciate your time here joining us for Chicago Live. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Keep us updated if anything else comes up.
Will do. Thanks for your coverage of this as well.
All right. Absolutely. It's 1:14 right now. We're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back. Welcome back, everyone. So our Bears are on a roll right now, right? And it feels fantastic. But one of the greatest determinants in how the season ends isn't just practicing hard, but it's also staying healthy. And that gets harder and harder as those athletes' bodies take a pounding week in and week out, multiple times a week. So now the NFL has turned to technology and Amazon Web Services on an injury prediction tool that uses data and artificial intelligence to help teams manage the health of their players. Really interesting stuff that they're doing. Want to go ahead and bring in Julie Souza, a global head of sports at AWS. Thank you so much for your time.
Good to be here.
Tell me all about this digital athlete tool.
So the Digital Athlete is a player health and safety portal that we were thrilled to work on with the league with the goal of reducing injury rates in the NFL. And I will tell you, this is a fact I'm particularly proud of. In the first season of rolling out the Digital Athlete platform, there were 700 fewer missed games by athletes. So it's really a predictive tool that lets coaching staffs and trainers and medical staff really understand who's at risk of injury and then disintermediate that, right? And so, whether it's load management or changing up training regimens to stave off potential injury, we're seeing real success there.
Wow. So how exactly does it work?
So the league is collecting a tremendous amount of data through optical tracking, which is cameras, as well as sensors that the players wear in the shoulder pads, as well as the ball being chipped. And so, to give you a sense of the volume, it's about 500 million points of data per week that are being collected and then processed, and machine learning applied and predictive modeling applied to be able to put those insights out through a digital portal that the coaching and medical staffs have access to.
Wow. Okay, so this is the third season, as I understand it, that all teams have had access to this. What's the feedback that you're getting?
It's tremendous. To have, nobody's asking for less data, right? So the fact that there's more data to help inform how they train and protect and coach their players. And you know what? Look, players want to be out there doing what they do. Team owners certainly want those players on the field, and fans want their the athletes out there performing at their best. So, everybody's invested in this. And it's interesting because the work that we have done has also helped us detect plays that are potentially more injurious, and then rules are being changed. Mm-hmm. So last season, the hip drop tackle, which I could demo that for you, but I won't. That was found to be had an injury rate of 20x over a normal pass or run play. Wow. And the league took a look at that data and said, you know what, we're banning this play. We saw the dynamic kickoff rule, or the kickoff rule change last season. And that was in response to the fact that it was causing a 2x injury rate and a 4x concussion rate over a normal pass and run play. And also, the kickoff wasn't being returned that often. So it wasn't that interesting of a play. So using 10,000 seasons worth of data, we were able to simulate, what could we do to that rule or to the kickoff so that we could optimize for returns and lower injury rates. And we saw that come to fruition last season with the new kickoff rule, really bringing injury rates in line with normal pass and run plays. And also lowest concussion rate ever last season as well.
Huh. Interesting stuff here. Now, you mentioned no one wants less data, but sometimes tough guys like to overlook issues to continue to play. And if they're performing at a high level, it has seemed like in the past, like people were willing to maybe look the other way. Does it make it harder now for those types of situations to occur?
Absolutely. And we are finding players leaning in here, right? Even you seeing some players wearing the Guardian cap or more fully than they were in the past. And that's because the players do want to prolong their longevity in the league. And so if the data helps them stay safe and healthy, they're actually really receptive to it. Other innovations that they've been receptive to are helmets. It used to be sort of a one size fits all, the same kind of helmet for every player, but the league was able to determine, again, through all of this analysis of the data, that a quarterback is going to absorb a hit much differently than a wide receiver. And so position-specific helmets are being designed for players as well. And that adoption certainly takes time, to your point of, change management and sort of being comfortable with what they're used to. But when presented with the data, this is a much safer helmet. This is a much safer way of training. Players are receptive.
Yeah, it's also a change in mentality.
Absolutely. And I think you have a generation of players that are more technically savvy and data savvy. So whereas it used to be all like, what's my say? You're hearing people say, what's the data say?
So have you identified already, and maybe have you already put into practice some innovation, some improvements to the tool that's 3 years young?
Yeah, so it's a great feedback loop. I mean, the teams are using it, their medical staffs are using it, their coaching staff, and what other insights do you want? How do we present this data? So sort of a dashboard view. We're talking to the league about actually putting a natural language search agent on top of it so that people could just type in questions, right, and get a natural language response answer back to them, leveraging generative AI tooling. So we're always looking to refine and improve and collect the feedback from the team and the league to do so.
Are some teams more receptive to it than others?
Absolutely.
You can tell us.
Right? That's always the case. They're the early adopters, and then there are those that are maybe a little bit more skeptical. But it's fully deployed across all 32 clubs right now. So as we've said, no one's going backwards. Nobody's saying we don't want this anymore.
Really, we had the most interest in finding out whether the Bears were receptive. I'm playing with you. I don't want you to answer that. So have there been any privacy concerns? Because it is a lot of data, and I feel like anytime we talk about data and multiple people sharing it, some people do have privacy concerns.
Yeah, that's all very, very carefully guarded. First of all, how that data is used and what for is carefully governed by the collective bargaining agreement that the league has with the players union. And we at AWS, security's job one, right? Protecting that data and making sure that is used for its intended purpose and only for those who have the right to access it. It's paramount.
Mm-hmm. Are you looking at maybe other sports, soccer or some other sports that could possibly be used, or these tools could be used for?
Yes. And I think that the application of this tooling actually extends beyond sport. You talk about repetitive motion, whether it's, physical therapy centers or manufacturing. There's an application for this sort of technology beyond just the sports ecosystem. But certainly, if you're asking me, what would you love to do with this and where would you love to take it? I would love to take it to the WNBA and figure out how do we get insights around female athlete player health and safety to advance that, because a lot of the work that's been done in the field of player health and safety to date have been on male athletes. So I would love to sort of catch the ladies up, if you will.
That is a new frontier. I like what you're talking about there. So what types of injuries? You mentioned repetitive injuries, and I even thought about tennis elbow. But what types of injuries could this be mitigating? Are we just talking about the repetitive ones, or are we maybe even preventing some that are very, very serious?
Sure, absolutely. We see lower extremity injury rates, you're seeing concussion rates. So it runs the gamut for sure. And it's not, to your point, just repetitive motion. It's, we can also detect when players are maybe favoring, hey, look, you're spending a little bit more time on your right leg. We got to build up the strength on your left. So you're starting to figure out things that help players train a little bit in a way that helps them keep them safer and healthier longer. So I think there's no limit to the type of injury we're trying to stave off.
Wow. I've said wow so many times in this interview, but my mind really is blown by the possibilities of this thing. I'm sure, I listened to an interview last weekend with Michael Irvin, and he's just going off about new school players versus old school players. You had to have some naysayers on this. what have you heard from that standpoint, and what do you say to them?
Look, I mean, the data doesn't lie, right? I mean, the data is telling us, 700 fewer missed games, right? Concussion rates lowest than they've ever been. Plays that were hyper injurious in the past either don't exist anymore or have normalized. I mean, you will have naysayers, but I think just proving it out. Here's the data. It's proving its efficiency and its efficacy. I think it's really hard to combat that.
Mm-hmm. And from a job standpoint, how many people are working on this? Like, it seems so extensive. Does this really widen out? And what kind of people are working on this? Like, what kind of jobs go into this type of technology?
That's a great question. Well, so you have to have the folks who understand football, right? So the league is certainly a strong partner here, and they're consultants as well. But then we're talking about machine learning experts, data scientists, ML engineers that are creating these models and insights. And then obviously at the team level, it's getting that feedback loop, but also, sharing the insights with medical staff, with training staff, with coaching staffs. So there's a wide variety of contributors to this initiative. And the skill sets range from medical and training to football knowledge to hardcore data science and AI ML tooling.
Yeah, and I ask you that because I think it's so important, especially for young people, to hear that, to know that there are so many different ways that you can work in the field. Like there's only so many players who go from Pop Warner to the NFL, but there are so many ways that you can actually work with football in other types of avenues. And this is an emerging one.
And the NFL has a great, and we're proud to work with them on their Big Data Bowl every year, where they're taking a subset of their data and they're making it available to aspiring and current data scientists and ML engineers and saying, hey, help us find insights from this data that help us improve the game. That's largely focused around their next gen stats, analytics. But it's certainly letting people who actually maybe have the scientific or engineering, experience, bring that and port that over to football to improve the game. So we just kicked that off with their Dublin game a couple of weeks ago. So that's a really exciting way of engaging people in football that, you're right, don't necessarily have to be a player to contribute.
Yeah, I am fascinated. Thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me today. I could probably ask you questions for the rest of the day, but we both have to move on. So, Julie, thank you.
Thank you so much.
All right. We'll take a quick break, everyone, and we'll be right back. and we're giving you a live look. Ooh, look at those clouds out there. All right, Caitlin Cody is joining us right now to talk a little bit more about what we're seeing. Are they dropping rain on us?
A little bit of drizzle. It's kind of that mistiness out there.
Just an icky.
Yeah, and if you look at the radar even, it looks like it could be dry because the drops are so small, but you're driving along and your windshield wipers are going. So it is definitely cloudy. Temperatures today are going to be on the cool side, 50s and 60s. Right now, most of us are actually in the 50s still, but highs will be in the low 60s today. We should be closer to the mid 60s instead. But it's not going to be like this for very long. In fact, by this evening, not only is it going to be dry, but the clouds are going to start to break apart. And then you can see on our 70 forecast tomorrow, we're turning things around. We're near 70 for Thursday. We've got sunshine tomorrow. Then the chance for rain is back. So we kind of have this bumpy forecast returning. Now Friday, the chance for rain, especially early, so even Thursday night into Friday, a high of about 72. And then Friday night and Saturday, we have the chance for rain and thunderstorms, 73 on Saturday. Lingering rain possible Sunday, and that's when you're going to feel the difference. Kind of a whiplash here from 73 Saturday down to 60 as our high. Ooh. 60 as our high. That means the day on Sunday is going to be in the 50s.
Oh.
And then next week.
And Sunday is the game.
Sunday
is the game against New Orleans. They might feel it more than us. Ooh, they're not used to that.
Oh, I know, right? The temperature, golly.
Yeah.
And then Saturday, we've got a big Halloween parade here in Chicago.
Yeah.
Hoping that we could get that in without getting
Arts in
rained
the dark?
on. Exactly. Yes, so that's happening. Big events around town. But you know what? The fall feel has returned. It's finally here, Chicago.
Yeah. Summer was hanging with us for
she didn't
a
want to let
little
us
too
go.
long. Yeah,
we had to break up
little
with her
too long.
eventually. Yeah, so it's dreary out there now, but don't worry about any heavy rain. It's just going to be kind of that misty, light drizzle over the next few hours.
What's our norm for now? Like, we've got all these folks who are still out, taking in the bean while they're here visiting. But like, what is the norm? If they're new to Chicago, what should it be feeling like right now?
Mid 60s, so it is below normal today, for sure. The 50s, that's not where we should be. The 70s, that's us being spoiled, and we do have that in that 70 forecast. But yeah, today is definitely going to be a cloudy, kind of dreary. It's Wednesday. Yeah. I was just saying this morning, even stay in, play some board games.
My goodness, I wish we had that, that choice, that option.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's hard even to figure out what to wear these days.
It's just
because we're kind of all over the place.
Layering it up, keeping a coat in your car today. A rain jacket would be perfect. So yeah, no big complaints, but we do have some more rain in the forecast over the next few days.
Yeah. All right, Caitlin, thank you. So you've given us the 7-day, right? And as we give you a live look outside, we're going to extend things just a bit further. Okay, a lot further. Let's be honest. We're going to go a lot further. You can still see there are boats on the water. I mentioned earlier the fountain has still been going. I mean, we've had just a couple weeks ago, we had temperatures in the 80s, and now we're talking about, Caitlin just said, Sunday, the main part of the day being in the 50s. Very short time span, lots of changes, and, does it hurt to look a little further? We're going to bring in the All Farmers Almanac now, the Almanac's senior editor, Tim Goodwin, to take us into the great unknown. Hi, Tim.
Hi, thank you for having me on today.
Thank you for your time here. I would love to know what you all have been working on and where things stand as of right now.
Yeah, I mean, we're really working on the 2027 edition now. It's in, the 26th just came out in, late August, but we quickly turned the page and start working on the 27 edition. The forecasts will start for that almanac. We'll be putting together December or January. So when we put these forecasts together, we're really looking sometimes a year and a half in advance.
What kind of data do you use to get that far out?
Yeah, so it's a mixture of 3 different scientific disciplines. We're looking at solar science, climatology, meteorology, and we're also taking into account these 30-year statistical averages put together by government meteorological agencies. So we're looking at, trends and historical events based, mixed with solar science, these sunspots on the surface of the sun to really kind of put these forecasts together. When Robert B. Thomas founded the Almanac in 1792, he believed that the weather here on Earth was influenced by these sunspots on the surface of the sun. So we still use some of that, but of course, modern technology and scientific calculations really play a big part in it now.
Yeah, and you all just released your Thanksgiving 2025 travel weather map. Some people maybe are already starting to get at least their, travel arrangements together for Thanksgiving. So what does it show?
Yeah, so we always try to look, we're looking really far in advance when it comes to these forecasts. So right before Thanksgiving in your region, we're looking for some snowy periods and kind of colder conditions for that 10 days right before Thanksgiving. But things will change as we get to the holiday and the weekend after. We're looking for more sunny skies and turning warm. But unfortunately, don't get used to that warm conditions because the month of December will be anywhere from cold to very cold for most of it, and lots of mixture of snow in there too.
Now, you said don't get used to it, that we're going to have cold conditions in December. It is Chicago. Most of us would expect that. So what do you say when people are kind of naysayers to your information?
Yeah, I mean, people, when we look at the forecasts, a couple days in advance or a week in advance, they're not always right, So when we're doing these long range forecasts, we're looking at a lot of different things, but a lot of it comes into, nobody can predict the weather with 100% accuracy. If somebody did, they'd be, very well sought after, very rich. There are people that don't necessarily buy into these long range forecasts, but there are a lot of people that do and have followed it for a long time. There's a lot of we have a lot of readers that write in that talk about the forecasts and how they use it to plant their gardens and to plan big events. So there is a lot of people that believe in these forecasts. There's a lot that goes into them. We take a lot of time and care to put these together. We're not always right. Traditionally year over year, we're 80% accurate. But so, we like people to look at them and see what we have predicted. We want people to look and see how we did each year in their region for winter and summer, because that's the whole part of it is, we want to get it right. We want people to be able to come back to us and trust us for these forecasts.
80% accuracy is pretty good. So let's talk about maybe some other regions. Like, who do you see maybe being the driest, or having the most rainfall, or the coldest, or the warmest?
Yeah, when it comes to Thanksgiving, I kind of looked at the regions around you because, people tend to, they'll travel a few hours or for a day to go. So when you're looking south to to our Ohio Valley, they're going to be isolated showers with some kind of chillier conditions at first and then warming through that weekend. Over to the west, there's going to be some more rainy periods, but it's going to be a little bit warmer than where you are. Traveling north to the upper Midwest into Wisconsin and Minnesota, we're looking at some snow for that couple days right before Thanksgiving and some more flurries kind of going through that weekend. So that's the region I would kind of prepare. You might hit some inclement weather, coming back and going up. So, might want to prepare for a little bit of extra time when on the roads that time.
All right. Now, you talked about Thanksgiving. I need to talk to you about Black Friday. The Bears are playing in Philly. Do you have any expectation of what it's going to be like?
I don't have any predictions for the score of the game. I have, I'm a football fan, so I've been following along. I think the addition of Ben Johnson and Caleb Williams are really meshing really well, and you guys are playing good football. It was a nice win the other night over the Commanders. When it comes to the weather in Philly for Black Friday, we're looking at really sunny conditions. It's going to be a little bit mild, kind of leading up into that Thanksgiving time, but it'll probably be a little bit on the colder side once it gets to game day. But I think they'll be used to playing in that kind of weather.
Well, I like your comments about the Bears thus far, especially giving us our props on the past game this past week. So let me ask you this. What are some other things that you all work on outside of these long range forecasts?
Yeah, the Almanac has its traditional, categories or subjects that we work with. Gardening is huge for us. Farming, folklore, history, food is another big thing. On our website, we have tons of great recipes. So, we try to stay true to what the Almanac began as. It's much different than when Robert B. Thomas founded it in 1792. But, we try to stay true to a lot of that stuff when it comes to astronomy. So, we're working within those confines, trying to find new ways to present information that that our readers will find valuable. The almanac is used in a much different way than it was when, it first began, even through, the 1800s, early 1900s. So, we want to provide information that people maybe didn't know that they needed to know. What I like to think about the almanac is that it's something that you can pick up every day and learn something new, whether it's as simple as when the sun is going to rise or set that day, what you can see in the night sky on that day, that week. So, always trying to plan ahead. We spend a lot of time talking about story ideas and how we can, give something different to our readers that they can't find somewhere else, and that will give them a reason to come back the next year.
Yeah, you talked about the changing landscape, and really that this whole show is a part of the changing landscape for media and trying to meet people where they are. Tell me this. What do you think it is that is like the engine for you all that actually keeps people interested after all of these years?
I think a lot of it, if you look at that yellow cover that's right behind me, that's something that has been around for, hundreds of years. It's iconic. It's something that people, it's something that's nostalgic to them, I believe. We hear from readers all the time that talk about how their grandparents introduced them to the almanac. They're the ones who started showing them those long range forecasts. They started talking about the astronomy. And I think that's what has kept the almanac so popular and relevant, is that, generations have passed it down to the next generation, grandparents sharing it with grandchildren, parents sharing it with children, and then those children growing up and continuing to buy the almanac. We all know that, times are not easy right now. We try to keep everything affordable. We think for, $9 for a year's worth of information is still pretty good. We want people to pick up the almanac and see that it's still got that historical aspect to it. It still has some of those principles, that calendar of the heavens feeling that Robert B. Thomas founded, but with new information and new stories that will give them, information that they can share with their kids, with their friends, with their family, sitting down, especially around the holidays.
Tim, great chatting with you. Really appreciate the time.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me on.
Mm-hmm. And where can people find you all if maybe they're new to the Almanac? Where do they need to go to get the Farmer's Almanac?
Yep. Anywhere books and magazines are sold. You can go on our website, almanac.com/where to buy. You can put in your zip code and it'll tell you all the stores and locations that you can find it. You can always order it from our website as well as Amazon. We've been climbing the bestsellers lists on Amazon for a number of weeks now. So, it's really popular there. If people just want to order it and have it sent to their house, that's a great way.
All right. Thank you so much. Have a great rest of your day.
You too. Thank you.
I'm going to call you back if we don't have 10 days of snow before Thanksgiving. I'm playing.
Please do.
All right, everybody. We're coming up on 1:45. We'll be right back. Okay, everyone, we are back now talking about the government shutdown now in week 2. And as one of our guests yesterday said, now it's getting real. Now we're talking about either layoffs or paychecks going in part, and the fight to keep them going full stream, at least for our troops here in the country. A federal judge has now temporarily blocked the Trump administration from conducting mass layoffs during this government shutdown. That is a major victory for the unions that were challenging President Trump. But I'd like you to listen in to Democrats who are speaking on the Hill right now.
$20 billion in taxpayer money that he's sending there. This shows the administration's priorities. They'd rather give $40 billion to a MAGA dictator than help relieve Americans from the health care crisis they are suffering from. Whatever happened to America first, Donald Trump? Whatever happened to America first? It's time for Republicans to end the chaos and get serious, and we are doing everything we can to make that happen. Now, about the rifts. Every day the Republican chaos seems to get worse. They seem to double chaos almost on a daily basis, and nowhere is this clearer than at HHS. Trump and Vogt managed to do something truly astonishing. They, quote, accidentally fired twice as many public health workers as intended. It's vicious, it's mean, and it's incompetence, all wrapped up in one. Let me say that again. They meant to fire hundreds of people, but they were so careless they accidentally fired hundreds more. They chose to vindictively fire thousands of federal workers and couldn't even do that right. No one is forcing Trump to fire scientists or doctors in the middle of the season. They're doing it because they want to. The goal of Project 2025, a vote, and it seems Trump, is to just decimate the federal government no matter how it hurts the workers and no matter how it hurts the American people. They're gutting America's public health defenses because they want to. And don't take my word for it. Senator Lee said, quote, Russ Vought has been dreaming of this moment ever since puberty. Republicans need to get serious. They need to negotiate. We are ready to negotiate, reopen the government, and deliver desperately needed health care to the American people. Senator Murray, and my pen.
You know, for weeks we have been hearing a lot of heartbreaking stories from folks back home in my home state of Washington, families who are absolutely panicking about their premiums that are doubling. There's small business owners who are having to think about abandoning the job they love to get employer-sponsored health care elsewhere, or just foregoing coverage altogether. But today I actually want to talk about our neighbors, Idaho, because today is the first day of open enrollment in Idaho, which means today, right now, families are getting their first real look at the cost of Republicans' inaction on health care. Republicans don't seem very eager to talk about that, but there is no running from the fact that these hikes are going to crush people. That's why last week I actually held a call with people in Idaho who are watching their health care costs go through the roof, and here's what I heard. One retiree who's not old enough yet to be on Medicare told me about how her premiums are going to jump by 173%, almost triple. You think that's bad? Another Idahoan I spoke with had learned that with the tax credits, his premium will be $367 a month. Without those tax credits, a whopping $2,232 a month. But Bob and Susan are far from alone. There are more than 100,000 people in Idaho who rely on the ACA tax credits to help them afford their health care coverage. Today, those families will log on to shop for a health plan and feel their heart drop as they see these prices have skyrocketed. They're wondering if they can even afford health care now. It is terrifying, and it's happening right now in Idaho. And it's coming to states across the country in 2 weeks. Several other states have already opened their window shopping for these health plans. People in my state have already gotten notices about premiums doubling, and yet all the while Republican leaders are trying to stick their heads in the sand and trying to pretend that everything is fine. On one hand, we have many Republicans saying, what's the rush? We can talk about maybe doing something on health care later. Never mind the fact that they refused to talk about this earlier, even as they rushed to jam through tax breaks for billionaires a few months ago. And on the other hand, we have some Republicans who are basically saying they don't want to do anything. In fact, some Republicans still wish they could repeal the Affordable Care.
Again, we've been listening in there to Democrats on the Hill as we continue with no end in sight, really, to the government shutdown. We are anticipating a news conference in maybe the next 30 minutes or so from President Trump, along with his FBI director. So we'll hear from them and go live to them just as soon as we can. But we want to bring things back here to home for the time being. A new report from the OIG, the Office of the Inspector General here in Chicago, has just been released for the third quarter of 2025, and it has some eye-opening aspects to it for sure. Going to go ahead and bring in the Inspector General for the City of Chicago, Deborah Witzberg. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks for having me.
Tell me about putting this report together. How long does it take for you to get this together, and what all goes into releasing a report like this?
This is our regular quarterly report. We're obligated by our enabling ordinance to issue a report summarizing the efforts of the office during each quarter. And so that's what we've done here. This is our regular report summarizing the work that the office has done in the third quarter of 2025.
And give me on a high level what your role encompasses.
We are charged with promoting economy, effectiveness, efficiency, and integrity in the operation of city government. We do that in three ways. We do three kind of channels of work. We do administrative and criminal misconduct investigations when somebody in city government is accused of breaking the rules. We do program and policy work looking at whether city government is operating as effectively and efficiently and equitably as it should. And we do transparency work where we try to make information about city government more meaningfully accessible to the people to whom it belongs, to Chicagoans.
And for sure, people are expecting more and more transparency. So let's start to break this down. The release says that your report documents a failure of mayoral staff to cooperate with OIG investigations, sexual misconduct, and more PPP loan fraud by city employees. That's a lot. Let's take it frame by frame. The failure of the mayor's office, his staff, to cooperate with your investigation. Where was the breakdown there? What was your reach out, and where were the blocks?
So the municipal code makes it a condition of city employment to cooperate with OIG. All city employees are obligated by law to cooperate with our work. That's how we ensure that people are accountable when they're working in city government. And we found, actually in 4 separate investigations this quarter, all included in this report, 4 unrelated investigations across 4 different city departments, we found that city employees failed to cooperate with OIG's work. We recommended that all 4 of those employees be fired. It is incompatible with working in city government to refuse to cooperate with OIG. And so we recommended that all 4 of those employees be fired. In 3 of those situations, the relevant city department agreed with our recommendation and has moved to fire those employees. So the Chicago Police Department, the Chicago Department of Public Health, and the Office of Public Safety Administration all agreed with our recommendations to fire employees whom we found had failed to cooperate with our work. In the 4th of those cases, we found that a senior employee in the mayor's office failed to cooperate with an OIG investigation. The mayor's office disagreed and declined to impose any discipline on that employee.
What happens when someone disagrees with your finding or refuses to comply with it?
Well, this is a recommendation from us to the relevant city departments, and when our recommendations are declined, when a city department disagrees and declines to impose any discipline, then the rest of that conversation is really one to be had with the people of the city of Chicago. It is ultimately up to Chicagoans to determine whether we can live with a world in which only certain people have to be accountable.
Okay, so let's talk about this issue of sexual misconduct. Obviously extremely serious. Where are you finding this, and what went into this aspect of the report?
This was an investigation in which a city employee was arrested for public indecency. And we determined that because of the nature of the conduct and the nature of that employee's role, there was a sufficient nexus, a sufficient connection between the misconduct and their city position to sort of justify a disciplinary recommendation. And so we recommended that employee who was arrested for public indecency be fired from their city job. The Department of Streets and Sanitation agreed and moved to fire that person.
Okay. And then there's the PPP loan fraud by city employees, and it's prefaced by more. So you've had this part of the report before.
Yes.
Where are we still seeing it, and why aren't we seeing any change?
Well, what we're really seeing here is the tremendous volume of these cases that we are working our way through. So pandemic relief fraud has been a tremendous issue really across the oversight community because of the volume, the scale of the fraud that came about in some of those programs. So we early on in our efforts here, rather than just taking a reactive approach where we were just waiting for complaints that city employees might have gotten fraudulent PPP loans, we undertook a proactive data analysis to see if we could ourselves identify people under our jurisdiction who might have received fraudulent loans. So we did that proactive analysis. We found about 1,000 PPP loans that had been issued to people under our jurisdiction. Now, certainly not all of those loans were fraudulent. Some of those were perfectly legitimate, but many of them had some indicia of fraud. And so the reason we are continuing to see these cases reported out over time is that we are simply working our way through the body of cases. And that includes the one reported here, where we found that, in fact, a city employee had fraudulently received a PPP loan. Wherever we have found that a city employee received a fraudulent loan, we've recommended that person be fired. You don't get to defraud the government while working for the government.
Yeah, I see you have 306 active misconduct investigations. Just talk about how hard your job is.
We have plenty to do. I am a true believer in the critically important work of this office. Enforcing the rules against misconduct in city government, that's what we've got. That's what stands between us and a government which we cannot ask people to trust. I think given everything that is going on, both here in Chicago and on the national landscape, it has never been more important than now that we build a local government which people have reason to trust, that we have a local government in which people have reason to be confident. The city of Chicago operates at a tremendous deficit of legitimacy with its residents. City Hall has spent generations earning the benefits of no doubts. And so the importance of the work we do is to try to pay down that deficit of legitimacy, to hold bad actors to account when they break the rules. So our work it certainly is very challenging. I am very lucky to do it with extraordinarily talented people, and we'll keep at it.
What do these types of allegations, though, that substantiate your investigations, what do they say about the city we live in?
Well, look, the Chicago way is a proper noun and not in a good way for a reason. Much has gone wrong for a very long time in this city. It is the most basic responsibility of every one of us in city government to work to make this a government that looks more like the one that Chicagoans deserve, and that is one that is accountable and transparent.
So what was the most surprising or disturbing thing that you found in this particular report? And then I'd also like to know where it stands in line with maybe the most surprising or disturbing thing that you've had to release to the public since you've been in office.
Well, I'm not sure this exactly answers either of those questions, but one of the things that I worry about a lot is the fact that on the national landscape, we are seeing very determined efforts to undermine and weaken government oversight. We've seen the removal of the federal inspectors general. We've seen the defunding of the federal kind of backbone organization for offices of inspectors general. We've seen government officials who have caused political embarrassment to elected leaders simply by doing their jobs be retaliated against. We all ought to be very concerned about efforts to undermine government accountability work, and we ought to recognize those same efforts when we see them right here at home.
Yeah, you mentioned things that are being done by a Republican administration, and yet you are enduring things also by what is very largely in part a Democratic administration. So you're finding it either way.
I'm not sure that resistance to government oversight is a partisan issue.
Okay, so let me go back to surprising or disturbing. What took you back in this report, or what? I mean, it hasn't been out that long, but what do you think will take most people aback?
I hope that people are surprised to find resistance to government oversight. I hope that that surprises people. One of the things I worry about in terms of the national landscape is I worry about people becoming sort of immune to what should be really shocking and really distressing, which is some effort to hide the government from the governed. So I hope that people continue to be concerned about that.
Okay, and what comes next? You release this, and then what happens?
Well, we have lots of conversations like this one. Our work is only as impactful as we are effective in talking about it. Our work is intended and designed and required to bring into public view things that happen in dark corners in City Hall. And so, we have public conversations about our work. We while abiding by our confidentiality obligations, we put all the information we can into the hands of Chicagoans, into the hands of the people to whom information about the government belongs. And then, further conversations about that are to be had by Chicagoans. There are decisions to be made by Chicagoans about what we can live with in city government.
And let me ask you this: you are finding resistance from the mayor's office. Some people will ask, and this is just maybe if they don't know, how you do what you do or why. Is it the people of Chicago who put you where you are, or is it the mayor?
It's a really good question. So we have independence protections. Independence is the hallmark and the lifeblood of Inspector General work because, as you say, when we are doing our work, it is sometimes unflattering to decision makers in City Hall. And so the Inspector General, the person in this seat, is selected by a committee of people. Those people themselves are named by some by the mayor, some by the chair of the City Council Committee on Ethics and Government Oversight. That selection committee identifies a candidate, suggests that candidate to the mayor nominates a candidate to City Council, and then that person is confirmed by the City Council. The term, an Inspector General serves in a protected 4-year term, and that is to prevent an Inspector General from being sort of intimidated out of doing the work. The idea is your job is not conditioned upon your pulling punches. And that term, the protected term of an Inspector General, is staggered with the term of the appointing mayor. So I was appointed by Mayor Lightfoot. Mayor Johnson will appoint my successor.
Okay. All right. Deborah Weitzberg, appreciate your time. Thank you so much. And please keep us up to date on things. Come back when you release your next report.
Thanks so much. Thanks for having me.
Okay. Everyone, it's 2:05. Like I said, we are awaiting a major news conference to take place in this 2 o'clock hour with President Trump there at the White House in the Oval Office with his FBI Director, Kash Patel. We are anticipating them to talk about crime and their efforts to reduce crime, especially, they say, in major cities. So you would think that Chicago will come up quite a bit in that conversation, but as soon as it begins, they are a little bit delayed right now. As soon as it begins, we'll go live to it. We'll take a quick break and we'll be right back. Just about 2:10 right now, and we're going to go back to Washington for a bit to listen in as we Democrats are continuing to speak about the government shutdown now in its second week here. Let's listen in live.
Voters in your district. That is the question we need to be asking, is will they find the courage to listen to the voters in their district and do what's right? And I'm going to tell the story of New Mexico. Right? New Mexico is one of those states that relies heavily on the Affordable Care Act and the tax credits. So in New Mexico, our woman governor, together with our leadership in the House and the Senate, voted on some legislation recently to make sure that we could provide a temporary fix to the expiring Affordable Care Act tax credits, be well, in New Mexico. But we were joined by Republicans in the state legislature. Only 3 senators, Republicans, voted against it. Every other Republican senator was there, voted for it. This is an example of Republicans, especially in rural districts like mine. These are Republicans in rural districts like mine. We overlap, listening to their voters, listening to their constituents, having the courage to show up and listen. And we know that across the country, the Democratic Women's Caucus is listening not just to the voters in our districts, but because we have leaders who don't pay attention to their own voters, that we know that it is our job to fight that every woman in every corner of the country has access to health care and at a price they can afford. And that's what we're talking about with regards to extending those tax credits, the same way they were able to give permanent tax cuts to the wealthy and to the billionaires, to those 700 billionaires. Numbers are always just about that. Think about that. 24 million people are going to be negatively impacted directly by the tax subsidies in order to benefit 700 people. And these are the stories that we keep hearing. Those are the numbers. But what we are hearing and talking about are the stories, some of which you have heard today. And we need to remember that it is women who are the decision makers in their families for health care issues. They're going to have to decide when they get those notices, and they're already getting them in New Mexico. I'm assuming they're getting them in your states, and I'm assuming they're getting them in every one of your states, and that's how you know who is telling you the truth. Because if you are seeing health care premiums out there that are going up, you know what the truth is. You live that truth. And we are here fighting for your truth. Because those women will have to make the decision, do I pay my rent? Do I pay for groceries? Or do I pay for my medicine or my health insurance premium? And what we want to do is make sure that that decision is not fatal for those children and for those women. Thank you very much for being here today, and if there are any questions, we'll take them.
Well, people have been pretty out front about saying this is something we want to talk to, we care about.
Again, we've been listening into women, members of the Democratic Caucus, who are talking about this government shutdown now in its 15th day. And I can tell you that the Senate has failed once again. This is a 9th time that they have taken a vote on the GOP bill to fund the government. It has failed yet again. We are in day 15 again of the government shutdown. Military members will still be paid. That is coming from the Trump administration, moving money from research. It's unused money that was going for research and development that they are now going to use to be able to pay military members, at least for the time being. They were set to get their checks today, so they still will be paid. And also a federal judge today at least temporarily blocked the Trump administration from mass layoffs. So there are some developments that are happening, and also it looks like we are continuing on with the government shutdown into another day. This is, again, day 15. Bringing things back home again, let's bring in State Representative Cam Buckner. There's been so much conversation about what is going to happen to the Bears. Will they stay in Chicago? Will they be in Arlington Heights? And it seemed like for a moment everyone was kind of coalescing around, okay, it looks like this move is actually going to happen. Until yesterday, he threw a wrench into things down in Springfield and introduced some legislation that could stall or hinder the team's efforts. So Representative Cam Buckner, thank you for your time today.
Thank you for having me. How are you?
I'm doing all right. You know, you play ball. Soldier Field is in your district, so you are the person to talk to on this. Tell me about this legislation, why you introduced it, and how you came to create it.
Yeah, the piece of legislation that was introduced yesterday is the STARS Act, the Stadium Transparency and Responsible Spending Act. And what it is really is a effort for the state of Illinois to start having some very streamlined and predictable conversations and processes when it comes to stadium financing. We know for far too long in this state and really across this country, billionaire team owners have asked the people to foot the bill for their billion-dollar playpens, which are these stadiums. And to your point, as someone who was an athlete, as someone who has worked in professional sports, I've actually built stadiums in my career before the legislature. I understand how this space works, but given all that's going on in this state and around the world, we can't be writing blank checks to teams without having some semblance of accountability in those processes.
Did your phone ring with someone from the Bears immediately after you introduced this legislation?
Of course, I've been in constant contact with the organization. I've been very critical of them publicly and privately, and I will continue to until they do what I call show their work and show why what they're asking makes sense. I've had conversations today in person with members of the Bears front office who were here in Springfield. To me, this can't be just about them, no. We see, once again, these billion-dollar entities continuing to go to the people, asking the people to either pay their bill or to erase their debt. And then 2025, when we look at the type of money that we need for transit and education and public safety, I don't know why we're still talking about stadium financing as if it's even a possibility without guardrails. So all of this bill does, as far as I'm concerned, it says show your work. It says be transparent. And if a stadium deal is going to happen, it needs to happen with two things: sunlight and scrutiny.
And when you say be transparent, let's go back to this 2003 Soldier Field renovation, because a lot of people really didn't realize they're still paying on that.
That is correct, right? And so I often think about this when the Bears did the last renovation on Soldier Field, when the city did the last renovation on Soldier Field in 2002. I was a high school junior who was working a weekend job as an usher at Soldier Field during Bears games. I watched the wrecking ball come in after that game against the Philadelphia Eagles in 2002 and start the renovation process. Here we are 20 plus years later. I'm no longer a high school student. I happen to be in this role now, and we still owe $532 million on that. Who owes that? The people of Chicago, not the Bears, not the folks who use that space, but those of us who pay taxes in the city. And so if we're going to try to move forward and we want to be the example to other states and cities on how to deal with these stadium financing conversations, it has to start with us being honest, and we have to show the people what they're getting for it.
Yeah. Do you see, though, their argument in terms of needing a new facility? I mean, if you visit other stadiums, and I know you do, if you visit other stadiums and you come back to Soldier Field, do you see their argument in this?
I absolutely do. I understand the economics of it. As I said, as a person who worked in sports front offices in my past, I get it. And I don't think that they're wrong to try to have a conversation about creating a new atmosphere for themselves. What I do think they're wrong is asking you and me and my constituents to pay for it. I think there has to be a better way to do this. Once again, this team in particular is worth nearly $10 billion. I'll say that one more time. That's billion with a B, $10 billion. And I think it's short-sighted, myopic to come to the people and say, we want to build a new stadium because we want a better fan experience, and then ask the people to pay for it. And then, by the way, most of the folks who are footing the bill with their taxes will never be able to afford to even buy a ticket to walk into their stadium. And that's the truth today, right? And so I just think it's time for us to shift the paradigm and change the way we operate in this space.
Now, it did seem like they were getting more help, or it maybe made more financial sense to them to go to Arlington Heights.
So I think as they run their numbers, they've said that Arlington Heights makes more sense for them. And once again, what I've said is that if they land there, if that's what they're going to do, I would want them to continue to play their home games in the city of Chicago. I think one of the great things about Chicago sports is that all of our teams play their home games within the city confines. I think that's a huge deal that they can't boast that in New York or LA or Dallas. And so I want us to keep that going. But if that is not a possibility, given whatever the financial realities are, and they have to leave, I would just say that they need to find a way to pay for it themselves. Once again, this can't come back to the doorsteps of the people. And so the response here has been lukewarm to some of the things that they've asked for. I think it appears that they have been getting further in the conversation than they really have, because they've presumed that they were going to get what they want, like the good old days. These are not the good old days. We're putting the people of Illinois first, and we're going to have that conversation with them in public and private, however they want to have it, because the truth of the matter is that we can't just write a blank check and turn our back. Okay, so let's say if you're not writing a blank check, and obviously I'm not asking you to give away everything, but where do you see a happy medium being? I think it's the Bears' obligation to start negotiating on what they're willing to pull forward, to bring forward. But I think we should back up and start from the beginning. In order to have that conversation, we have to have a full and clear picture of what the real economic benefit and impact is, right? The Bears have put out a study that they claim is independent, but when you pay for something yourself, it's hard to call it independent. There's another study that came out from the village of Arlington Heights that was actually also paid for by the Bears. And so what this bill that I've put forth asks for is for a true independent analysis about what the stresses are, what the obligations are. Will this be net gain or a net loss for Arlington Heights and for the people of Illinois and the people of Cook County? We need the numbers and the data in order to make a real decision on how to move forward. And that's what this bill puts into motion. Mm-hmm. So thus far, before they talked about moving to Arlington Heights, was there ever a plan that they put forward that you saw some daylight in? It's hard to tell, because when I talk about being transparent and honest, the Bears have flip-flopped. As you remember, they initially said that they were not going to leave Chicago. Then they said they were going to go to Arlington Heights no matter what. Then they came back and did a big press conference last April in Chicago saying that Chicago was their home forever. Then they switched again and said they were moving to Arlington Heights. And so it's hard to keep up with their plans. I've had whiplash trying to figure out which plan is the real plan. And so once again, I hope what they can do as a team is press reset, talk about what they've done wrong, have a conversation about the way forward, and do it once again in public, do it on the record so that the people can hear it and that we can make the best decision for the state and for the city and for the county. One thing that I think many people have said, and now it's possibly coming true, it's a little easier to get behind a team that's winning. So at least these last 3 games, people have been at a very happy place. And just talk outside of this stadium proposal, your thoughts on the season thus far. Yeah, it's been an interesting season so far. I like the way they've been able to turn around and pivot. There's been some very frustrating moments for those of us who root for them on Sundays. Some of the games, like the one on Monday, they should have had put away a long time ago. But they, kept us entertained, and they found a way to win at the end. But listen, Chicago's better when the Bears are winning. I think the region is better when the Bears are winning. I'm happier. Everybody in my household is happier when the Bears are winning. And so hopefully they continue to do the right things on the field, and hopefully that transfers into wins off the field that start with accountability and transparency and find a way to tell the people what they really want and how it would benefit them. Yeah, and where do you see them going this season? How many wins? What do you feel like the projection of the season is now for you? Well, it's it's a long season. So far they've been able to dust the cobwebs off after the first couple of games. Um, uh, it's hard to predict, but if I were to make a prediction right now on the spot, I could see the Bears walking away this year with between 6 and 8 wins, depending on how the injury report looks deep into the season.
Okay. What happens next with your conversations now that you've presented this bill? What happens? There was this belief going into the veto session that we had kind of put to bed the conversation on the Bear Stadium for a while, and now we're right back in the thick of it. So what happens now that you've introduced this? Where does it go from here?
Yeah, that belief that things were over and pretty much a fait accompli were really pushed by the team. If you talk to legislators, if you talk to the governor, if you talk to the Speaker of the House and the President of the Senate, none of us felt comfortable giving the Bears a tax break while there are people around Illinois who need a tax break, while there are families who are having a hard time making ends meet. To the Bears, this is the most important thing on their docket. But for those of us in Springfield who are tasked with legislating for the entire state, we're worried about ICE and the National Guard. We're worried about the federal shutdown and what it means for state resources. We're worried about education and the environment and the energy and the fact that people both downstate and in Chicago have soaring energy bills right now. Those are the things that are important to us. Those are the priorities for us in this veto session. And so I never thought that their issue was a priority. But what needs to happen next, as far as I'm concerned, is that they need to once again push the reset button, come to Springfield, have a conversation. I've asked particularly for George McCaskey and the Bears ownership to find their way to the state capitol to have a conversation. Just about a year and a half ago, when the White Sox began these talks about a new stadium, Jerry Reinsdorf came down and had real conversations with leaders and with rank and file members. And I think that if Jerry Reinsdorf can find the state capitol on his GPS, hopefully the folks at Hollis Hall can as well.
Okay, all right, yeah. And for people who don't understand the process of legislation in the state, where does yours go from here?
So now it will be assigned to a committee. We may get a subject matter hearing in the next couple of days here, but after it leaves the Rules Committee, goes to committee, we'll have at some point a committee hearing and a committee vote on it. It has to happen that way before you go to the floor and have a full vote. Then the same process starts over in the Senate before it can make the governor's desk. So there's a process here, and I'm willing to slow down that process if there are, once again, more robust and honest conversations about what the people get out of these conversations and what the people get out of this proposed deal.
Something tells me someone's firing up their GPS right now. Representative Kim Buckner, thank you so much for chatting with me today.
Thanks for having me.
All right, it's 2:27, everyone. We're going to take a break, and we'll be right back. 2:30, everyone, as we give you this live look outside right now on a cloudy day here. It's just been kind of icky. That's not a meteorological term, but that's what I'm calling it, at least for right now. Emily Walls, our chief meteorologist, is here now with how things are going to shape up throughout the rest of the day.
The rest of the day, not looking too bad. The rain showers, though, they're actually holding on just a couple hours longer than originally expected. So originally it was kind of looking like we were really going to be drying things out around midday, and a lot of people are. But there's still a couple stragglers out there. So we're still stuck with a couple rain showers. And I know it's kind of, dampening our day a little bit, but it's not a terrible thing because we've been dealing with drought-like conditions. So
it's needed?
Yes, very much needed. Most of the area is actually considered to be in a moderate drought. So any amount of rainfall that we can pick up is actually a really good thing. But the rain, that's going to come to an end later today completely. Tonight we have skies that are expected to become partly cloudy. And then tomorrow we're right back to sunshine. So this week, it's been a little bit of a back and forth. We've had cloud cover, then we've had sunshine. Cloud cover, every other day it seems like. We're going to keep that going right on through the week. So tonight we're going to start to clear things out. Tomorrow we get back to seeing some sunshine. By Friday, we're clouding things back over again.
Oh man, not going into the weekend.
Yeah, going into the weekend. So again, I'm trying to not be a downer about the rain because we need it. But yes, your Saturday is actually looking pretty soggy. So if you have outdoor plans on Saturday, you're going to be dodging some raindrops, and brief heavier downpours certainly going to be possible as well. But then going into Sunday, we're going to start to see things tapering off a bit. So it gets better toward the end of the weekend.
But cooler.
But Anita, we really have to keep these numbers in perspective because we have been so spoiled this fall. So typically for this time of the year, your average high is around 63, 64 degrees. That sounds cool to us now because we're just not used to it. But, today's temperatures in the upper 50s to near 60 degrees, that's pretty typical for this time of the year.
It has felt like faux fall for a while.
Yes.
Like what's going on? Which season is it really going to be?
Well, so the outlook taking us all the way through the month of October is actually trending above average. So we're going to have these little dips here or there where we see seasonable temperatures. But if you look at the weeks as a whole and you were to average all those temperatures together, most weeks in the next 2 to 3 are still expected to be above average. So we're really not changing the tone here through the rest of the month of October.
It's so interesting, one part of the year we're happy for above average, and another part we're like, above average.
I think at this point in the year, though, we're all just holding on to it as long as we can because we know what's right around the corner. We know. And one more number that I really wanted to kind of put in your minds a little bit is our low temperatures for this time of the year. Average is in the mid 40s, 45, 46 degrees. And that is not what we've been waking up to. We've been waking up to temperatures that have been well into the 50s, if not the 60s. So it's been really pleasant. But you'll notice here, we have a couple days going into early next week when we start to see that more seasonable air mass moving in. That's going to bring low temperatures down into the 40s, and that's the October chill that we're used to around Chicago.
It's coming. We know
it's coming.
All right, thank you, Emily.
You're so welcome.
2:33 right now, and as we've been watching things on Capitol Hill, we know that there's a lot going on. We've been waiting throughout the last hour and a half now for a major press conference to take place with President Trump and his FBI Director Kash Patel as we give you this live look back to the White House. That's supposed to be at the Oval Office. It was supposed to start at 2 o'clock, so they are far behind, and I just got word that they haven't even called in the press to come in the room just yet, so not really knowing whether this is even going to happen before we turn things over at 3 o'clock, but we are awaiting it. Should happen any moment. We've already allowed you to hear from Democrats there on Capitol Hill today a couple of different times, whether they were speaking in a full press conference or when the Democratic women stepped out after the 9th vote failed for the government shutdown, when they stepped out to speak about what they are fighting for right now, for this particular shutdown, which many officials say could end up being the longest one in U.S. history. The Democrats say that they are fighting for health care, that the premiums are expected to go up at the first of the year, and before that happens, they want some assurances that those premiums aren't going to price out a lot of people in our country. On the flip side, the Republicans say that they are willing to have those conversations, but they want to go ahead and open up the government now. And hey, we can have those conversations later. So there's a lot going on. Everyone's dug in. We are on day 15 of the government shutdown. shutdown, and day 15 means that paychecks are on the line. So we know that the military troops will still get paid. That was a big question, a major issue, obviously, for the service that they provide our country and the freedoms that they protect for each and every one of us. They will still get paid. The Trump administration is taking money that they had unused for research and development, which means it's still coming from someone else who needed it, but from research and development, and that will be used now to pay troops who were expecting a paycheck today. But there are plenty of others whose paychecks are either going to be partial. I've even spoken in the last week to a federal worker that knew that they would only get 70% of their check today. So some will get partial checks, and by the 28th of this month, if there's still no resolution to this government shutdown, people will go without paychecks. And for even the aviation workers that we saw striking just here in Chicago at O'Hare, they were handing out leaflets yesterday, educational leaflets about the government shutdown. They were saying, well, you might get back pay at some point in time, but creditors want their money now. So one of the things that they gave as an example was the last major government shutdown that lasted for some time. And, these kind of come up, they may go away in like a day or two, but for the last one that lasted some time, many of the air traffic controllers had to get a second job on top of still having to do their primary job, because you still have to go into work. They're still essential workers, but they also had to have second jobs so that they could get paid, so that they would have paychecks in the interim. So there's a lot going on with this government shutdown. A federal judge just this morning ruled that the Trump administration cannot do mass layoffs. That was a big issue going into today as well, that, okay, if they went into day 15 and paychecks were on the line, that they may have to do mass layoffs. That's a temporary order now that a federal judge has put in place, that they will not be able to do mass layoffs. But again, there are many who are looking and trying to decide what happens next now on day 15 of this government shutdown. We'll take a quick break and we'll be right back on the opposite side of it. Welcome back, everyone. We're taking you live here to Spain, where they're actually having pro-Palestinian protests. You can see folks who are in the middle of the streets right now outside of the Israeli consulate there. We know that there have been marches in Rome, Barcelona, and Madrid to protest Israel's military campaign in Gaza. Again, this now still continuing on, even though there is a ceasefire deal, and there were celebrations about this ceasefire deal to begin the week. But we also know that there's much to sift through when it comes to the ceasefire deal. There are some families who are beginning to have funerals for their loved ones whose bodies were returned to them. I believe there's about 8 bodies that have now been returned to their families. Obviously, 20 living Israeli hostages that were released and brought back to their families as well. Nearly 2,000 Palestinians who were held prisoner that are now back with their families. But what happens from there? One, not all of the bodies were even released. And what happens to sustain this ceasefire deal that's just been started? We're going to continue to watch what's happening over there. But right now, I want to bring in Representative Bill Foster to talk about another issue that has been a great it's fostered a great deal of conversation over the last month especially, and really maybe increasingly over the last several years. So Representative Foster, are you there? Thank you for your time.
I am indeed. Audible and visible here?
I can see you now. Appreciate you taking a few moments. I know that you and another representative announced that you had sent a letter calling on social media platforms to combat foreign bot farms spreading disinformation and encouraging political violence. Obviously, with the rise of social media and more people getting information online, this is a critical topic.
Yeah, well, this is not a new problem, but it's getting worse. It first came to everyone's attention probably following the 2016 election, where, the Russians were operating bot farms to influence the result of U.S. elections. And there are very large bot farms run by commercial entities. There are bot farms running AI bots trying to get seniors and other just normal people to fall in love with a bot so that they can lure them into scam investments. And it's getting really bad, and AI is really amplifying this.
Yeah, and you worked. Yeah. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Well, every time there is an act of violence, or particularly political violence, you see a spike in the operations of these bot farms, and they are widely believed, and sometimes we can prove it, to be operated by some of our foreign enemies. And that was one of the main points of our letter, that this was, and we've actually gotten a response from one of the companies so far to come in and tell us some of the answers to some of our questions here. Because this is one of the forces that's sort of tearing our society apart, and not just the United States, around the world. We have to, some of it are just people acting with anonymous accounts, saying whatever they want to say, because no one knows who, on the internet, no one knows if you're a dog. But there are also a big problem with those voices getting amplified by increasingly capable artificial intelligence bots that can they're harder and harder to tell from the real humans.
Yeah, and you worked with a Republican representative on this. We talk so much about divides in our nation, and especially when it comes to politics, that it's not often that we are having conversations about bipartisan legislation or bipartisan efforts. Talk to me about why it was important to work across the aisle on this.
Well, I think you always get a better response from a company or from a federal agency if they know that this is a matter of bipartisan concern. They know they won't be tripped up in something that only the Republicans or only the Democrats are interested in. And then the truth is, we all are. None of us wants to try to operate in a politics where half of what you say is being commented on by inauthentic speech from robots. And so that's one of the important motivations here.
Yeah, and obviously, We just saw the governor of Pennsylvania just talking about what took place at his home, the fire bombs, the Molotov cocktails thrown into his home just yesterday. This has to be an issue that's also top of mind for all of you all.
Oh, that's right. Well, every one of us sees on our own social media accounts, you say something, even something quite innocuous, it'll immediately get criticized in a sort of formulaic way by a number of these bots who would just say, "Oh, a member of Congress said something. Let's talk about how great Russia is," or whatever. Whoever's funding their bot. Sometimes it's pretty obvious that this is a pro-Russian bot. Sometimes it's much more subtle. A lot of these bot farms, they set up normal comments, getting a reputation as a normal human being. And then when something happens that matters a lot to the country that's operating it, all of a sudden they will come to life and pretend like they've just been, had this new enlightened idea that they now finally realize that this person's good or this person's evil, whereas in fact they've just been acting normal for a while.
Yeah. How much do you fear for your or your family's safety given recent events?
Well, I have been at this for a while, and before I started politics, my wife and I had a very serious discussion. I didn't enter politics until my children were off in college, and so I knew Gabby Giffords quite well. She and I came into Congress at about the same time, and this is always something that's been with us, since before Abraham Lincoln. And it's so political violence is always something that's on your mind. I find that it's really lands hardest often on my staff and not on me. The person who has actually lost their lives with Gabby Giffords was a staffer, just trying to do his job, helping out Gabby at an event in her district. And so these are, the political violence is a tough issue, but when it gets amplified by foreign-controlled bots, very often they're just advocating for civil war, that something bad will happen, and that immediately say, this is why there is nothing short of civil war or guns. Get out your guns, everyone. Let's go to war. There's no nonviolent solution. And these bots will say that. And unfortunately, some people take them seriously.
Has there been any proof as to, or numbers that we have as to how many of these accounts are foreign versus how many are domestic?
Well, that's what our letter was requesting. The companies that run, these giant social media companies have very large technical resources. I bet they have a pretty good guess where these bots are being operated out of, and then they have large groups. They don't often like to talk about it. Partly because it's embarrassing, and partly because they get a lot of revenue selling advertisements. And so companies will pay them for clicks, and the clicks are actually generated by bots. So they don't have a financial incentive to clean all the bots off of their network, because then their number of viewers that they'd have to report to the advertisers that pay them, those number of viewers will go down and they'll get less money. And so that's one of the reasons why it's useful for Congress to demand answers and numbers, which is one of the real points of our letter.
Yeah. What are some of the other requests that you're making?
Well, that was the main one. Just tell us, how can you tell the foreign from non-foreign accounts? What are the actual numbers here? What are the techniques you use? And it's especially important right now because what's happened is there's a group that in the government that is supposed to be tracking this called CISA, the Cyber Insecurity, what is it? Cyber Infrastructure. I have it on here. Cyber Security and Infrastructure Security Agency. That's the group, a very competent group. We worked with them a lot. They unfortunately have been largely laid off and fired by the Trump administration. Many of the best people there have quit because of the politicization of their job, and others have just been driven out by the Doges and so on. And so that's a huge problem right now, that normally the cop on the beat against foreign invasion of our computers and our social media networks, there's no one available anymore to really take action and even to detect it.
On a final note, you did mention that at least one company has responded. Could you tell us who that is, or at least what their response was?
Well, the response was positive, and it was a request for a briefing. And so I'll have a lot more. You get back to with me in a couple of weeks, or maybe less than that, and we'll actually be able to get the information, find out, what exactly they're doing on this, and what we can do to encourage them to do more.
Okay, I'll hold you to that. We'll be back in contact with you. Thank you so much for your time today, though.
Thank you.
I appreciate it. It's just about 2:50, and we do now have the press conference with President Trump and FBI Director Kash Patel. Let's listen in live.
So now I'd like to ask Director Patel to say a few words, and then Pam and Todd also. And I just want to congratulate them. This is an amazing thing, and we're just at the start. We're going to go into other cities that we're not talking about purposely. We're getting ready to go in. And when they go in, like Kash as an example told me that people didn't even know. 5 months ago, they went into Chicago, and they started doing a lot of work in Chicago. And we brought the numbers down a little bit. And but that really was just preparatory work for what we're going to do with the surge. We're going to have a surge of strong, good people, patriots, and they're going to go in, they straighten it all out. So a lot of these cities we're already working on, but we don't do it with a big flavor. But in a little while, you're going to see some numbers that you're not going to believe. And I think you'll probably start with Memphis, because I'm hearing the numbers are much quicker than we even thought possible. But again, D.C. it speaks for itself. Chicago is going to be okay. We're going to save Chicago. And I told you, and I told them, a very respected man, the head of the Union Pacific, said, "Sir, save Chicago. It can be saved." And the way he said it was like, can you believe it? We're trying to save Chicago. But I understood exactly what he wants, and that's what we're going to do. We're going to save all of our cities, and we're going to make them essentially crime-free, like other countries have crime-free. If you go all over the world, you go to the world, you hear Afghanistan, and you hear all these different places. Our crime in certain cities is worse than anything they can even imagine. And we're not going to have that any longer. It's going to stop, and it stops right here. Kash, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. What I'd like to do is just highlight some of the outstanding work that the men and women of the FBI have been doing. And thanks to your brave leadership and the mandate you were given by the American people to not only defend the homeland but crush violent crime, you tasked us with our great partners at the Department of Justice and the Attorney General and the Deputy Attorney General to start making arrests and bring prosecutions and safeguard our cities. And you said it. This is just the beginning. In just 7 months, I hope the media takes a look at every one of these charts, because these are the best numbers for fighting crime in U.S. history, and it's only 7 months in. And to do that, our vehicle to do it of choice was Operation Summer Heat, which the FBI architected to go after violent criminals. And in just a 3-month span, you had 8,700 arrests of violent criminals. You had 2,200 firearms seized off the streets permanently to safeguard our communities. You had 421 kilograms of fentanyl seized. Just to put that in perspective, that's enough to kill 55 million Americans alone. You had 45,000 kilograms of cocaine seized. And thanks to our Department of Justice partners, you had 2,100 indictments in 3 months, from June to September alone. Mr. President, that in and of itself would be historic for a 4-year presidency. You did that in 7 months because you let good cops be cops, and you partnered us with the right people at the Department of Justice to put the handcuffs on and bring them to court and put them in prison. And if that weren't enough, when you look at the year, for the entire 7-month period that we're talking about here, if you look at the past 4 years of the Biden administration, 16,000, 17,000, 15,000, 15,000. That's the number of arrests year over year of violent felons in this country for the Biden administration. Mr. President, in 7 months, you have 28,600 arrests of violent felons in just 7 months alone, because of your leadership and the dedication of the men and women at the FBI who want to go out there and do the job they were prevented from doing, because that department used to be weaponized and politicized. And this is what happens when you take out the fangs of weaponization. This number is historic by every metric. 28,000 people have been arrested, violent felons alone. And then when you go over there and look at some of these charts, if you don't mind, I'll just hop over here. Look at the metrics for not just violent crime, but the homeland. Mr. President, during your administration, the FBI has found and located 5,400 children. That is a 30% increase year to date over the last administration. Violent crimes against children arrests alone are up 10%. Gang arrests are up 210% in the last 7 months alone. And transnational organized crime, which Stephen Miller has been a great partner in, is up over 12% alone. These numbers are historic just as a snapshot. But just so people don't think we're focusing on violent crime alone, the national security mission, Mr. President, under your leadership has never been stronger. We have gone after espionage activities against our main counterparts in China, Russia, and Iran. In China alone, we've had over a 50% increase in espionage arrests alone and prosecutions. In Iran, we have had a 50% increase, again, in espionage cases. And in Russia, we've had a 33% increase in espionage cases alone. When it comes to counterterrorism, year to date, we have 125 arrests this year versus 100 last year, year to date alone. And when it comes to the cyber criminal activities, which are some of the largest enterprises plaguing everyday Americans, we at the FBI have put out a mission to go after cyber criminals like never before. Last year, they had in total 191. This year, you already have 252 arrests. 52 arrests of violent cyber criminals who are stealing from senior citizens, who are violating our children's rights and freedoms, and who are violating everyday Americans. These programs are record. And two of the things I'll finish with that I'm most proud of, Mr. President, this FBI. Fentanyl. As you know, it's a scourge that is killing our youth, 100,000 plus a year. To date, the FBI has seized 1,900 kilograms of fentanyl. That's enough lethal doses to kill 127 million Americans alone. To date. And if that weren't enough, Mr. President, you said we have to go after the worst of the worst. And you empowered our Department of Justice, our Attorney General, Deputy Attorney General, and the Deputy Director at the FBI, led the charge, not just on summer heat, but he also led the charge in the FBI's 10 most wanted fugitives. These people have been on the run for years. And in 7 months, you captured not one, not two, not three, but 4 of the FBI's most top 10 fugitives. 4. And just to put that in perspective, Mr. President, the Biden administration captured 4 in all of 4 years. You're on 7, and we're going to get to 10. We're going to get to 10 of 10. This includes a lady who murdered her 6-year-old handicapped child and fled to India. We got her in 2 months. This includes a narco trafficker. This includes a sex trafficker. This includes another first-degree murderer and gangbanger. These people were on the run because of the prior administration's reckless policies that destroyed our communities, and you came in and with a mandate said, go after the worst of the worst. This is just the beginning. This is what happens when you let good cops be good cops at the FBI. Mr. President, I just want to thank you for your incredible leadership, our brave partnership with prosecutors who know how to bring cases and make sure these arrests stick. And that's what the Attorney General and the Deputy Attorney General have led the charge across this country, because arrests without prosecutions are meaningless. We are deterring criminals from doing this activity. We are preventing criminals from coming into America, and we are absolutely crushing violent crime like never before and defending this homeland, sir. And not to mention, I almost forgot this one, it took you, sir, 2 weeks to get the Abbey Gate bomber. Joe Biden had 4 years to look for him. You got him in 2 weeks thanks to the interagency effort by the FBI and the CIA, went to Pakistan, and now 13 brave warriors who were senselessly murdered because of the disastrous Afghanistan withdrawal. They have justice, their families have a peace of mind, and we're going to continue to find the others, Mr. President. On behalf of the FBI, sir, I just want to thank you.
Thank you very much, Chris. Great job. Very good. Very impressive. Ken?
President Trump, the men and women of law enforcement say 2 things to me repeatedly. First, you have taken the handcuffs off them and let them do their jobs, and you let cops be cops. That's why all this is happening. The director, the deputy director are working around the clock. All of these great men and women in the FBI, they have families at home, and they are working during a government shutdown right now. Many of them have small children. Many of them, I was talking to an agent this morning, many of them have babies at home, and they are working around the clock to not only keep our country, but our world safe. And that's what Operation Summer Heat did. Thank you, Director, and to the Deputy Director for everything you did on behalf of the Department of Justice, and you're going to continue to keep doing. And they set the stage for what we're doing in Memphis. You're going to hear a lot more about that, our joint task force next week, but they set the stage for Memphis. And last night alone in Memphis, there were almost 70 arrests. There were 12 guns seized, And there was a 70-year-old man arrested as a result of our operation in Memphis who raped a child under the age of 3. That one case makes everything we're doing worthwhile. So thank you all for being here on behalf of both of us. Thank you, President Trump.
Todd, you want to say something? Sure. Thank you, Mr. President. So this is a great day, and I think there's stats that the director talked about which are important, but I want to give 2 examples of what summer heat has done that actually will apply hopefully to everybody in this room. The first is for over 4 years during the last administration, there was a hotel in a town, the middle of a town in Alaska, that was being run as a drug den. There were over 1,000 calls. Will apply hopefully to everybody in this room. The first is for over 4 years during the last administration, there was a hotel in a town, the middle of a town in Alaska, that was being run as a drug den. There were over 1,000 calls to 911 over 4.5 year period. There were multiple violent crimes, drug dealers, overdoses, and murders at this one hotel, ruining a community. Summer Heat went in there, not only arrested all the participants that were controlling the hotel, but seized the hotel. And so that's one example of what summer heat means to everyday Americans that just want to live in peace. The second example is a large narcotics trafficking group that was selling fentanyl in the state of Washington. They were shipping fentanyl and using commercial aircraft, putting fentanyl pills and powder in suitcases, flying them from the southwest border, mostly Arizona, all the way to Washington. It had been going on for an extremely long time, and the entire organization was arrested. And I say those 2 examples because it's easy to look at the board and see 1,000 arrests. How much different is our communities now compared to the past 4 years? But there's actual life examples. Every one of these arrests means that our streets are safer, and that's because of the work of this administration, of President Trump and Director Patel. So I will tell you, Attorney General Bondi and I are together every day with Director Patel, figuring out ways that we can continue to do this work, and it's not going to stop. Like the Attorney General said, and like the President said, this is just the beginning, or phase 1, or a start, whatever you want to say, but it will continue on. So thank you, Mr. President, and thank you very much, Director Patel.
And Mr. President, just one last thank you from the men and women at the FBI. You found a way to get these individuals paid during a government shutdown, our 1811 agents. So on behalf of the FBI, it's a great debt that we owe you, sir. They're now allowed to pay for their families, so thank you.
And the military. Good.
That's right.
Thank you. Okay, thank you very much. Any questions, please? Brian, go ahead.
First of all, I know the feedback I'm getting from the American people, but they want to say thank you. Law and order is not an option in this country. It's a mandate. So I know the American people thank you for that. In terms of the guns that have been taken off the street, do you have a number of how many guns were taken away from someone that had a prior felony or a previous crime that perhaps we can prosecute that? Because I know that wasn't the case under Joe Biden.
We don't take guns off the streets of people that are allowed to have guns. So every gun that we're taking off the street is because it belongs to somebody who is not allowed to have it. Could be a felon, could be somebody who hears illegally. There's all sorts of conditions. But if there's a gun taken off the streets by the FBI, it's because the person who has it is not allowed to. It's not somebody who's lawfully allowed to have it. So every single one of those guns were taken off of people that aren't allowed to have them.
And not including the FBI, all of the other agencies. ATF alone since January 20th has removed over 25,000 illegal guns off our streets just since President Trump's been in office.
And Mr. President, if I could follow up on that, could there be any further conversation to have national concealed carry applied to actual DC? Like if you had a driver's license in Texas and you had a permit, of course you could drive.
Well, as you know, they've been talking about that for a long time. It's an interesting question. A lot of people feel strongly both ways, but we are talking about that, Brian. Thank you.
Mr. President, on Venezuelan boats, I want to ask you, why not have the Coast Guard stop them, which it is empowered by law to do? You know, this way you can confirm who's on the boat and ensure that they're doing what you suspect.
Because we've been doing that for 30 years, and it has been totally ineffective. They have faster boats. Some of these boats are seriously, I mean, they're world-class speedboats, but they're not faster than missiles. But we've been trying to do that for years, and so much of the drugs, 25, 30%, would come in through the seas.
right now we have, I would say, none coming in through the seas. In fact, I don't know about the fishing industry. If you want to go fishing, a lot of people aren't deciding to even go fishing. We've almost totally stopped it by sea. Now we'll stop it by land.
What's the next
But
step?
it never worked. It never worked when you did it in a very politically correct manner.
What's the next step in this war on cartels, and are you considering options? Are you considering strikes on land?
Well, I don't want to tell you exactly, but we are certainly looking at land now because we've got the sea very well under control. We've had a couple of days where there isn't a boat to be found. And that I view that as a good thing, not a bad thing. But we had tremendous amounts coming in by boats, by